How are you today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I am feeling A-okay.
We are going to be interviewing, in actual time, we're interviewing Heidi tomorrow at the Tobacco Factory, which is really exciting. So in a minute, we're going to magically jump from one area of Bristol to the next in but a flash.
Yeah. We also speak quite openly, don't we, about how this is all very mix and match as to how we record these things. And it's not like many podcasts where it's like one done 1 week, edited, and then goes out the following week. It's all...
We've very much been bashing out all of the episodes so far over about 2 weeks, actually.
Yep, pretty much.
Which has been maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah,
which has been great, actually. It's been nice to kind of immerse ourselves and just kind of go for it, which is nice. But I digress. Let's bring it back. Thank you for tuning in to Absolute Scenes. The podcast that interviews the vampire that we call the arts industry is a true detective when questioning its guests. And above all else, crosses its 6 fingers that there won't be any fallout. Hey, wait. And joining me is a man that once thought that Ted Lasso was about a cowboy with a problematic relationship with cuddly toys. It's Andy Barton.
Hello.
So, Andy.
Go on.
What are we talking about this week?
Well, it's going to be, obviously we've already said who our guest is, but it's going to be around assistant directing.
It's going to be about
directing, or the artistic director of Tobacco Factory. And I guess one thing that I was curious to talk about was starting your own company or I guess freelancing, which is maybe a sort of an evolution of that conversation, but certainly starting your own company as a creative. And that, I guess that's the same as whether you're starting your own band or you're going to... Or
you could start an accountancy business, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. No. I'd be terrible. I love numbers, but not to do an accountancy business. Would you be any good?
No, God, no.
No, okay, great. Good.
I am not good with spreadsheets. I'm not good with organising. I'm not really good with producing. I
love that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, despite being a named producer on this show, I
thought you'd be bad.
I do not like it.
I think you've been very good so far. Okay, you've been hiding the struggle.
I just don't like them. And I even did maths A level as well. I did an A level in maths.
All right, smarty pants.
Narrator, it did not go well. It didn't.
It's good to try. It's good to fail.
try
and fail. We love it.
But yeah, so this is about, so I'm curious about talking about sort of creating one's own company. I did so my MA was encouraged, as it was even a module part of the course. One of the modules was about creating your own theatre company. And I did with a group of people. We were called Fabletop Theatre.
Oh, yes. I remember this.
Do you?
I do remember this.
Really?
Yeah, I do remember this. Yeah.
And I'm incredibly proud of it. It was quite short-lived. I must say short-lived. I think it lived for about a year and a half, about 18 months in total. Our first show, a device show called Girl in a Box, which was I'm incredibly...
Ominous.
Ominous, yeah.
Trapping girls in boxes?
Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness, yeah. Well, the girl and the box. She wasn't trapped in.
And the box, okay.
Yeah, she wasn't trapped in.
Sounded like girl in the box.
No, sorry. That
sounds like
mumbling.
Room.
The girl and the box.
Okay.
And she, after a traumatic episode in her life, it was a sort of magical realism fantasy. A traveller offered her the chance to give away all of her emotions. And which she does, so that she can know, so that she no longer has to feel the pain of the trauma that she's experienced.
Oh my god!
And
starting heavy today.
Yeah. But in doing so, they don't just take away all of the negative emotions, negative feelings, but also all the positivity as well. Yeah. So she lives much of a life of just neutrality, but gets to a point after a few years where she becomes curious about actually wanting what it means to live, and meaning to live is having to experience sadness and grief as well as the happiness, and in order to have all the things of that, what's what makes one's human.
That sounds great.
And so we did, and she has to go through this sort of like magical land, which I stole loads and loads and loads of imagery from every Jim Henson movie, like Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, anything I could think of in it. But we did it all physical theatre as well.
Great.
So we were all on stage. Everything was done on stage. So all the costume changes, and we had these like clotheslines that had all of all the costumes on.
Great.
And we would do all the costume changes on stage, and then we would do all the scenery changes on stage, but we would be sometimes part of the scenery, and then we would do it because there was a group of 8 of us, and then
that's a good amount for theatre. Speaking of theatre companies, like that's a really good amount to have.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And then we did loads of physical theatre stuff with it. So we made all these like creatures, and then we did something but wasn't the same, but something akin to the hand scene in Labyrinth, where Sarah, played by Jennifer Connelly, she falls down a hole and gets caught by all these hands that are talking to her, but using the hands and creating faces.
I want to see the show now. This sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like it was many years ago.
But that's the thing with theatre, isn't it? That's opposed to like recorded media. Is it's like once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
Like there's so many shows that I'm just like, this is amazing, but it just will never come back. It's interesting. We were talking about that with Chris last week, weren't we? In terms of last week, but a few minutes ago for us, about things coming back and his absolute scene. I won't spoil it for anyone who's not listened, but that it might come back every 10 years. That would be incredible.
I think also, like what was also really important, and there's some really for me was at the beginning of because it was right at the beginning of my career, not just about making a show that people wanted to see, but also about creating a theatre company and how you create a theatre company. And there are many examples of it, and like this city is host to the sort of the Wardrobe Ensemble, which is
actually this Bristol particularly is full of like, it's much more of a making city. I call it theatre making, but as we've discussed already on this podcast, some people call it devising, or you put yourself more into like a writer or producer box, but I still think of it as theatre making. And this city is, and actually like the whole country, but the southwest I know specifically is just full of it. And it's really nice to be, because I was in London for about 10 years, and it's really nice to be back in a city that is full of that. And London's full of it too, but it feels more, I don't know, connected here. I feel like I know more theatre makers here.
And I think if you're, and even if you're wherever you are in the country, maybe even the world when you listen to this, my invitation, because I try and live by this, but my invitation is that if you want to start something, to try and just grab 2, if you can, at least one other person, and if not 2 or 3 other people who share not necessarily the same ideas, because it's not about the ideas, it's around the thought that you just want to make stuff.
Absolutely.
And then just being in a room and just coming, or even just like sat at a table and just turning out a script, or sat in a bedroom writing some songs, be it someone on guitar or whatever your skill set may be.
Because it's collaborative. Like my entire background is basically, before I became more of a straight actor. Is that how? I don't know. My entire background is theatre making, and I've run 2 companies and made various pieces of work and devised with other companies and all of that sort of stuff. I actually did Made in Bristol here at Bristol Vic the year after the Wardrobe Ensemble.
Oh, of course, yeah, you did.
And then my entire degree at East 15 was theatre making as well. And it's really interesting because I've really backed away from it for the last few years.
Yeah.
Maybe not interesting, maybe a little bit sad. Because I think I made... This is a sad element. I had a show on at Volts Festival. Rest in peace, Volts Festival. We love you. And it was on the week before COVID shut down.
Oh, yeah, of course,
so we were the last bunch of shows to be on Volt 2020. And I think that experience made me just be like, I just didn't want to make anything. I was too scared. And I think actually more recently, I've been working with people who are exactly what you were just talking about, like open, excited, sort of people who just want to make. And being around that energy again, even though I'm still scared, has made me feel like there are possibilities. And even though there's no funding in the arts right now, and I think just find those people who are positive and open to that. And even if it is, you just go, let's go sit in a cafe and co-write, or just discuss an idea. Like, people are why I do theatre, whether it's the audience members or the people I'm making it with. Like, it's such a collaborative thing. And I think you're completely right. If you've not got the people there that you feel safe with and you feel excited and energized by, I find it really difficult to do anything on my own. And there are lots of solitary things you can do in theatre on your own. Like, you can be a solitary writer. For me, theatre making, you just can't do it on your own. Even if you're making a one-person show, you need a director. You need, someone.
And I think there's a real, and I have a real curiosity around the real sort of like, the garage bands as well. And garage bands, not just for bands and for music, but also the garage bands of any art and creativity and, theatres.
Fringe companies.
Yeah. And also like people with a camera. And so many of us have a camera now anyway. If your interest is making like films or like
go
making
make some short films.
And I know that sounds quite, just go and make it. Well, but actually, it can be done.
Yeah, and make it as a concept film that you can then show to someone and be like, will you fund me to make this?
And it will be
full?
And it may be sugar honey iced tea at the beginning. And fine, that's okay.
What does that mean? Sugar honey iced tea?
Phonetics. Spell it out phonetically. And
yeah. Thank you.
And that's okay. And that's all right. But this episode is like, what's most exciting is around, we're speaking to someone who is running a theatre, and like, we're not just talking about a theatre company that may have 2, 4, 8 or even up to 16 people with some of the bigger ones. We're talking a full-on theatre of people who are working there and people whose lives depend on.
But also
receiving,
the Tobacco Factory receives a lot of work as well. So it's also lots of freelancers. I mean, all theatres receive work, but I would say the Tobacco Factory receives a hell of a lot of work. And also our guest has various different iterations of working in a company and being the head of a company, different times, different ways, different areas of the industry. So I'm really excited to hear their perspective. On that note, shall we jump over to our guest?
I think we should
physically jump from the Bristol Vic to
Heidi
the Tobacco
can
Factory.
bring lightness and positivity.
Yeah.
I mean, we are positive about it. We are positive about
wonderful.
this industry, and we're positive about everything that people like Heidi do for their theatres. It's incredibly exciting. Continue to support your local theatres, whether it's the smallest show, Amdram show that's needing £8 to go and see a pantomime on a village hall stage, or if you can.
Well. Yeah. Like, we know that the theatre is also a privilege.
Exactly. Or the bigger stuff. Support art. Just support art wherever you can. Thank you so much for joining us. This time, we're coming from the Tobacco Factory Theatre. Today's guest is very well known for her positivity, joy, and warmth that she brings into both her rehearsal rooms and her boardrooms. You may remember her from such theatre and arts companies as Bristol's Travelling Light, London's Chasm Arts, and as an associate artist at the Egg in Bath. She has a very vast experience in theatre making, and particularly in nurturing and feeding young minds in drama and live performance. She also has an exceptional director of theatre shows with her adaptations of Belle and Sebastian, and most recently Oliver Twist, receiving rave reviews and 5 stars. So please give a rapturous welcome to the hugely talented artistic director of Tobacco Factory Theatre, Heidi Vaughan!
Thank you so much. I really can't live up to that, can I? I feel like I'm blushing. This is not my natural safe space here in things.
So, listener, I have to say this. We just recorded that already, and Andy didn't press record. So Heidi had to listen to that twice.
A second time.
And she did such a good job of just sitting and just, well done.
Looking at
all
the floor.
True, though.
Well, that's very kind of you, but it's all perception, isn't it? So, Thank you for your kindness.
I guess it's sort of like it's trying to sort of like lift, and when we do these intros, I guess it's trying to sort of add buoyancy and hopefully lift us and our guests and hopefully listeners. But at the same time, I can understand the sort of like how humble many people are, and there can be a thing of like hearing, and also very condensed as well, because your life is so much more than just
it's quite
those
intense.
buzzwords.
15 lines of...
But also, we all know theatre is all about the other people that you work with.
Yeah.
So it's really hard when you kind of have that loveliness,
like a solo
but
artist,
that kind of weight on your shoulders, and you're like, actually, theatre is all about the activists all being together and collaborative. Exactly. So, you know, I just try and help things to happen. Yeah. That's all it is.
No,
but you have, like, that list of things is incredible. Like, you've done some really amazing stuff.
But before we get into that, though, before we get into that, we're going to...
So this would have been a surprise, but it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise.
It's the icebreaker question.
Well done, Andy.
Yeah, I know. So it's the icebreaker question, as our listeners will know, is something that we sort of give to all of our guests, but bespoke to our guests. And for you, Heidi, this week, it's the would you rather question. Would you rather have someone direct every aspect of your entire life, or be responsible for directing every aspect of someone else's life?
This is as hard the second time as it was the first. But I'm going to come in with the same answer, because I'm not very good at being institutionalised or kind of contained in any way, shape or form. I've got, quite a history of that, of like not completing courses.
You're a bit of a rebel.
And there's no... I just need to feel that there's a bit of freedom, and I think that's partly why I work in the arts, is the constant exploration of possibilities.
That's relatable, yeah.
However, I mean, the weight of being responsible for everyone else.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I mean, is it just one person or everyone?
No, so it's just one person.
Okay,
so
one person. Just one person.
So one person, you have full responsibility and autonomy over everything.
Is that being a parent?
That doesn't mean they can't give their own opinion, does it?
Yeah,
no.
they can.
Yeah.
You
can collaborate.
Really, it's a bit like just like having a team, really, which is you're there to kind of nurture and support and motivate and bring out the best. But I'm going to go with the second, but in a very Heidi way, because the thought of being boxed in,
just like,
oh man, gosh. Wouldn't work for me.
That was great.
That was a great one. That was a brilliant answer. Brilliant answer to that one.
So one thing that we'd like to play is Undercover Boss.
Oh, yeah.
And the question is, if you could work in any theatre in the world, doing any role whatsoever for a day, what would it be? So you've just got a day.
A day?
Just one day.
Just one day.
So what would you do?
Well, I always really loved John McGrath's take on National Theatre Wales, which was Wales was the stage, that it didn't need a building.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Something, I still lean into that. I think, God, that the thinking around that is really extraordinary. So I suppose trying to translate that into me and my world, my undercover boss doesn't really exist yet. But it might, probably when I'm dead. But I would love there to be a glorious ecological, environmental theatre in the middle of the woods that is completely sustainable. Glass ceiling, worked with the natural light. I mean, it's been a dream of mine for a long time. I would love it to be built in the Forest of Dean, which is where I come from, for the Deaners.
You heard it here first.
We'd love that.
That's amazing.
But I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime.
Never say
but
never.
In my head, it exists.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry it's not a tangible grown-up answer.
No grown-ups allowed here, it's fine.
I think that would be it. I mean, imagine that hanging around in that space, just sitting in that space.
Yeah.
So kind of just like
Just
an
existing,
incredible... And in my head, I've got the Eden Project domes.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That
Nice.
kind of
That-
architecture, that openness, somewhere where you can fling open the doors in the summer, where the weather isn't separate from us, where we're not other from nature.
So
And-
outdoor theatre, but for
Yeah,
the UK.
But for the UK,
Yeah.
exactly.
Great.
So still a place for story, but acknowledging that,
Could you imagine doing like The Tempest in that space
Yeah,
in a
it-
storm?
yeah.
That would be
awesome, wouldn't it?
incredible.
Awesome. And just one of the things I adore about tobacco factories is that in the round setup.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's something so special and intimate. And I think part of that is also from being in a found space as well, which we don't have some of the weight of kind of responsibility and heritage that sits with so many buildings, actually. Not just in the UK, but beyond. And so that sense of openness is really important for me, actually.
I would say there's a lot of heritage here. Not that you're saying that there isn't,
Yeah.
but I like
But it's
even,
not necessarily...
it's not the same as like 100-year-old building.
Yeah, it's like a library of stories, this building.
That's exactly
It's
right.
full of
Yes, yeah.
stories.
Yeah.
Its foundations are so deep in this community.
Yeah.
There was a lovely story about a young girl that was working with part of our Get Involved programme. And she said, oh, my gran used to work here. It was like, oh, God, how, really lovely that she's still connected to this building. Her gran, when it was actually the tobacco factory, and she said, yeah, she used to be a cigarette tester. Could you imagine?
Just sitting and smoking all day.
It's my style of theatre, but
Wow.
here we go.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
great.
Wow.
imagine that. But yeah, this is a home of stories and community, and so it feels right that this building has been repurposed for that aim.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So you've been AD now of three companies. Is that?
Yeah, 3 or 4. So Dot Nethel,
Yes. Travelling Lights.
Travelling Light, Kazoom.
Kazoom.
Kazoom. So what has been the same and what has been different with them?
The obvious answer there, and it is really obvious, I'm so sorry, is the same thing has been me, I suppose, because all you can do as an AD is bring yourself. I can't be Andy at work. I can't be Gabby at work. I can't be any other person than I actually am. And I suppose when you're looking at these roles and when you're talking to boards and you're looking to be recruited in that whole kind of, quite laborious and painful process that goes underway.
That feels like that box again that you're
word,
against.
I think my approach has always been, I can only do me.
Yeah.
And I try and do me as well as I can. But I am also a human being with all my infallibilities and failures and, whims and moments where I go, we must do this. And I go, oh, no, I must be more considered. And I must think about this in a different way. So I suppose, companies are informed by leadership, I think, a lot. But those leadership styles are very much attached to the individual that is in that position, really. So my value system may be slightly different to yours or someone else's on the street, and that's brilliant because we want that. We want to have different people bringing different ideas and possibilities and curiosities to the workplace.
Do you find yourself taking a lot of your work home with you because of those things?
Oh, God, I mean, that's it, isn't
When
it?
you
I mean,
love
tell me
it,
any
you do.
AD CEO that doesn't,
Or any artist, I would argue,
It's really
too.
hard,
Yeah.
and I think I've had times where I've been better. I've had times where I've been worse, but I've likened it before to having a faith. And you have to really, really believe in what you're doing, like to your marrow, just like when you're making a show, it has to take every molecule of you.
of course.
It has to, because if you have to do it that way because you respect your audience and you respect the artists that you're working with and you believe in it. And that's why those difficult years of the pandemic were so tricky, because we built a life, or we personally and as a sector, build a life around saying the arts really matter. And then all of a sudden it felt like, oh, wait a minute, some people are saying the arts don't really matter and they're a luxury. And that was tricky for me. That was a really tricky time. And thankfully I was at Travelling Light at the time with the wonderful Dienka, who's now CEO there. And we worked really hard at being the most charitable, civic, honourable versions of ourselves with as much integrity as we possibly could be to add value to others. So I think those boundaries are always tricky. Like I said, I've been better, I've been worse. Somewhere in the middle. But, I mean, the joy of me being here is that I came in with my eyes open. You know, this again is my third CEOship. So I'd kind of earned the stripes and I knew what I was going to need to do. So, and some things are joyful and wonderful, and some things are hard and tear at you and are difficult choices. And you can't take on that level of responsibility without being prepared to do that. And, you know, you're always on the line, aren't you? You're always at the end of a criticism for a tweet or a comment on a social media post, and that's all right as well.
I mean,
that's really all right.
Do you think the arts sector can still survive another pandemic if there was one?
Oh, please don't say that.
Well, no,
oh my God.
It's more of an idea of not sort of like financial or sort of like we're all going to sort of collapse and not ever wanting that, but it's more about, are we, with a view to looking forward, have I, as an artist, learnt lessons about myself and how I want to approach art that were to another one happen? Is there something that I'd maybe do different internally as well as externally?
I think it's a really good provocation. I think there was a lot of really positive learning that happened. There was also a huge exodus of brilliant, wonderful, glorious artists, which to be honest with you, I am still mourning that. Yeah. And I struggle within my own limited resources to give as much as I want to in that area, to empower, to offer opportunities in the same way. And I often think people think because we're a place, which is sometimes, again, you have to just say the basics. So we're a place, we're a building, and we're actually a really, really live team here. I think the equivalent is about 9 full-time members of staff, 13, working on part-time flexible,
Yeah, of course.
And am I right in thinking you had to, like, when just before you came in, team members were lost, or like?
It was, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
There's no
of course
that. And it's not something that sits very comfortable in your stomach. It's not something you want to do, but you are here for a short period of time. That's the thing about leadership that everyone needs to remember. Is almost as soon as you start in the role, you're almost making yourself redundant. That's your big job, is to make yourself redundant. So I don't think there are many jobs where you go in and you think, well, do you know what? I've got a period of time and these are the objectives. And really, you want to make yourself invisible to the point that the organisation is running itself so beautifully, so well, that you've achieved what you need to do. And it's time to hand that over to someone else. People shouldn't sit, and I feel very strongly about this, people shouldn't sit in these positions of power for long, long periods of time, because actually we need the energy of new ideas.
Fresh blood. Yeah.
You achieve more in that first year in a new post than you probably do for the remainder of it, because you've got that energy actually, and there are things that you can do that are quite quick wins. But there was a horrendous period of having to look at the restructure of the organisation, which was driven by the need to it was a very clear mandate from the board actually, and from ourselves, which was about making us a sustainable organisation that links to what you're saying about the learning from COVID, which is what, if we can't find sustainability when the times are hard, how do we find the wins when the times are good? And I think there was something really brilliant in that, because I'm here to serve the organisation obviously being a group of people, but also making sure that, you know, this is strong and resilient and delightful and a real place of welcome and wonder for everyone that comes through those doors, whether it's someone coming through with their dog to use the toilet and picking up a flyer on the way through, or whether it's the member of Acting Lab, or an artist that's travelled halfway across the world to see us, or an artist that lives 3 streets away. Everyone needs to feel welcome as they walk through the doors here. So it was really, really important to find that sustainable model, to know that when growth comes, which it will in time, it always does in time, season follows season, that we will be in a place to then grow and develop from quite a safe space. That as well.
I just want to pick up on what you were saying about that openness and that joy and all of those welcoming things, because one thing I've always noticed about you, I was explaining to Andy, we met, I don't even know when, several years ago. I auditioned for you and it was so lovely. And I always remember whenever I've written to you via email, even if you couldn't make an invite, or like we haven't actually physically seen each other until quite recently, you've always replied, and it's always meant so much. And I know it's a lot to ask of people to reply, but I've always felt a warmth and joy and honesty and just general kindness from you. It just seems like that's genuinely who you are. But I also wondered how you sustain that. Have you always been that way? Because I think it's such a beautiful quality for an AD to have. So yeah, I just wondered, like, how does that come naturally? Or are you really mean?
Thank you. That's really, that means a lot. Thank you.
But it's true.
It's something I try and work really hard at, actually. It's really easy in the world to become quite hardened.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it's really easy in the world as people think about, you know, running organisations like this as some sort of ladder and getting to the top. This kind of pyramid of, you know, oh well, someone else will do that, someone else will reply to that artist, or someone else will. But it's always been really important to me that people feel seen and they feel heard. I think that probably comes from me having a very working class background and not necessarily feeling very seen and heard, and then finding this glorious kind of theatrical world where there was a togetherness that was really quite something. And that's without me putting my own kind of psychological baggage onto the table for you. I think it's really important. I think it's the least we can do as human beings is try and.
But it's a lot of energy. So like, how do you look after yourself doing that?
Well, it's nourishing for me. So, you know, again, I'm not perfect. You know, in my emails this week, I think
Go away.
No.
I don't think you'd ever send that email.
You know, I probably get 100 plus emails a day. And, you know, sometimes I just have to bank them up for a few weeks and then do
fine.
Okay, I need to apply to these people now. You know, today's a slow day. I can take the time and answer people and talk to people. And that's why I do artist one-on-one still, which is, it's really important that if you define yourself as an artist, that you can have access to someone in this building.
Because often buildings feel very inaccessible.
Exactly. And it's funny how walls do that, isn't it? Is that they can both feel a place of safety, but they also can shut people out.
Very easily.
And you have to hold that responsibility very, very carefully and be really aware of that. The other thing I would say is my learning as an artist is that most of the best ideas don't come from me. Shh.
Don't tell anyone. We'll edit that out.
But some of my best learning has come from other people. It's from some of the one-liners that have come out, or where people have said, why isn't there ... Or, you know, is there anything we can do? Or could we just have some space on an afternoon to do this?
Well, you said that a lot with Oliver.
Yes.
That happened a lot with that production, right?
It did a lot. And that's okay. That's okay, because it is that. It takes a community to raise a child. Well, it takes an awful lot of people to make sure that art is meaningful and that it's being seen and impactful, and to make a piece of work is like that anyway, isn't it? And you've got to, even when you're in the rehearsal room as the director, be open to the fact you might have got something a bit wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. It's really not always easy when you're there and you're trying to hold a room. You think, oh my word, actually, I think I've done a really bum steer here. Or I've made the decision too quickly.
We've had a thought. I think we might just change this.
I might just explore this as another option.
Not because it's bad.
You know it. And so that world of the rehearsal room isn't really that different from the world of us sat here talking now, or what's going on in the cafe, or, you know, what's going out on the streets, is that actually we need everyone.
Need each other.
What's hard is when those conversations are aggressive.
Yeah,
you know, and there are aggressive conversations that happen where, you know, and I understand the frustration, you know, where people want more than I can physically give, or they want things because they've met me, and actually there has to be a due process of fairness, you know, so they might meet for a cup of tea and then presume their show is programmed. And that's really tricky, because I can sit, I can listen, I can make people feel heard and you know, hopefully make them feel supported. But we have to move away from that as, you know, the work happens on the golf course sort of place.
Is that
actually part of the challenges around the arts is that it's the people you know. And we have to move away from that and make sure that the processes are really fair and inclusive and transparent and accessible. And, you know, we're being really honest about how we programme, or really honest and fair about, look, we only have, you know, 30 half days of free space in the Spielman. How are we going to, you know, delegate that out? Or how are we going to make sure that, you know, the bursary places that we offer for our youth theatre are fair? So it's kind of across all of us, actually, that we need to make sure that I can give time and space, but I won't bend those rules, because that's where those awful bits of art being based on privilege and who you know have been born out of.
The thing is with the who you know, because I completely agree, with the who you know, I can understand from a human psychology point of view. It's because we physically see a face, we feel the energy, we know if we can trust. But the important thing, going back to what you were saying before, is like, if that is the case, then you have to open the doors and meet people. And I guess it's that thing of like, a lot of it is who you know. Let's change that, but also come and get to know.
Yes,
so that you can. So it's not.
Definitely.
It's who you know when the door's shut.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It should be who you know because you've had the opportunity, right?
Exactly.
So it's that balance.
And that opportunity also isn't always as quick as I'd like it to be, Gabby. I'm really honest with you. So we've got a big old database of one-to-one, you know, artist meetings, and it's not as quick the turnover as I'd like it to do, because unfortunately there's all these other bits. There's all these other bits of a job I have to do.
If I could just have coffee all day with people, I'd love that.
Imagine. Yeah, I don't think the staff would be very happy about that.
But
Would be fair on there, would it?
We're very grateful for you coming and doing this.
It is really important that there are routes in, that there are ways that people who, like I said, it doesn't matter to me whether you've been an artist for 30 years or you identify as an artist because you're writing a play in your spare time between having to do night shifts, or however that route is, if you identify yourself in that way, I am very, very happy to have that conversation.
Love that. Love that.
If of your previous shows or even projects, any projects that you've done over your sort of your whole career, is there one that you'd be curious about doing back here at this theatre? I mean, regardless of your programming.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, so regardless of what programming you I mean, because I understand you're sort of, but if there's something that you've done in the past that you think, do you know what? Quite, you know, dipping my toe back in that pond.
Yes and no. Of course.
Great
of
answer.
course. Great, do I get a tick for that?
Yeah, you can have a gold star.
This is great.
This is like writing an essay. I agree with this bit. So it was really joyful, my time as associate artist at the Egg. Really
I can imagine.
amazing.
What a building.
What a building. What a team. What a kind of outlook, really.
Who was the team when you were there? Who was AD? Was it still Kate?
It was Kate there and Lee Lyford, of course.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And just a really strong pool of associates that all kind of lent in. There was a really clear. There's just
Not sure if you could hear that, listener.
great.
There
We
was
love it.
Actually
whistling.
whistle in the theatre.
I
but
I know. Shh, don't tell anyone.
This is the modern age. And we created some massive shows.
Yeah.
Massive, because a lot of it we were working with community groups and young people, and of course you've got a team of 70 performers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can do things in ways that you just can't. I mean, there are obviously the challenges that come with it, and distributions of parts and breaking down and doubling and all of those sort of things. But the ambition of those pieces were really huge because of the amount of performers that we could have on stage.
I just feel like we've not got that capacity right
amazing.
now, is it?
I mean, that is where, I learned so much about human beings and my own practice in that process. For years, I really, really did. So there was some, super comedy errors was great. That was Storm on the Lawn. So was Robin Hood. That was superb. We did a wonderful House Bernarda Alba, actually, which was with the Adult Acting Company and Community Choir, and that was a real stonker. Harriet de Winton was the designer on that, and we turned the Egg back into the round, which was just...
That's great.
Oh, it was super, really super. So we kind of linked the seating through
All
with
the
the
way
back
around.
of the set and then back into the seating. So really just glory. And there's something about the sound of a community choir's voices and how that
power
fills a
of
space that just cuts into your soul in a way that is just extraordinary. So there were some really stonking shows there that I would always reconsider. I mean, I'm doing Winter's Tale in spring.
I'm so excited.
Not wanting to
Genuinely.
drop the...
No, that's great.
tickets are available now.
Yeah.
I did direct that at the Egg.
You
So it was my
did.
second time. So actually,
So there we go.
This question is really telling, and it's just such a remarkable piece of work, and completely different challenges, of course, because we had again massive cast, again superb design, lots of kind of time to explore. This time we are going to obviously be working with professional performers who will bring so much of that experience into the room and into this text. I mean, the text is so delicious.
Tasty.
It's so, you can literally feel it in your mouth. I feel
Heidi
like I'm
is salivating right now.
Honestly, it is extraordinary. And part of the reasons you go back to those stories is partly because the power of those words are so... the texture in those words are really quite something. And of course, it being a latter play, he's kind of really...
Yeah.
He's come into his own now.
He's playing with that language, but also, my God.
It's brilliant.
Someone described the play as Shakespeare on acid to me about
valid.
three months ago. And I think it is valid. You've got storms, you've got oracles, you've got statues coming to life. You've just happened to have a bear appear.
Just one, though.
So he really plays with theatrical form.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what was exciting was people would probably expect a Shakespeare coming back here. We hear it a lot from our audiences, how much they miss Shakespeare at the Tobacco Factory and how it was a big, building block really on the development of theatre here and the housing of theatre in this building. But what's exciting is, of course, they probably wouldn't expect one of those slightly rogue,
not a traditional drama.
Yeah, one of those ones that isn't really put there as one of the big five.
Yeah. And I like rogue. I like that.
The big five are done.
That's great.
They're done.
I mean,
That's
people
fine. It's taken
talk
care of.
about it's kind of a bit like Beethoven's Last Symphonies, that thing of it's a masterpiece, but it's absolutely bonkers to try and unpick the form and structure of it. But
definitely.
It's almost like Shakespeare's really playing with what is theatre at this point, which is extraordinary. And also it's a man in his latter age, which is saying, you know, part of the story is about forgiveness, and it's almost like a love letter to his own family saying, can you forgive me for being away in London all these years, and I have missed the, you know, death of our children, and this has happened, and was it worth it? And so there's a real heart there, and the end when, you know,
Spoilers. In case you
spoiler
haven't
alert,
read it in the last
where,
3 million
where
years.
Hermione and Leontis are reunited after 16 years, with him having thought that she'd passed. You know, I didn't realise when I programmed this show that it will be 16 years next year since my father died.
Wow.
And isn't that funny how life and art run? And you go, gosh, if he was to come back for just a day, what would I say? Because I've changed over 16 years.
Yeah, of course.
And of course there would be change in the world, and, you know, there'd be grandchildren to talk about. And,
of course,
you know, over that period, if you could have, that's my question to you, if you could have one person back from the other side, who would that be? And that's almost what we're asking our audience at the end, really. So it's
Exciting
that
times,
was a long
basically.
answer.
That was
short,
and
so beautiful.
That was a
Apologies.
great answer.
Yeah.
That's going to need to go on the editing floor.
No, I love it.
No, that's staying.
in there,
Every
trust me.
second.
We do. It does sort of like neatly segue really into as we sort of reach a sort of apex of the interview, and we get to our absolute scene to find out what your absolute scene is. So. To remind our listeners, as always, each week we ask our guests to tell us their absolute scene, the scene that either has inspired them to get them into this mess in the first place. Maybe it's something
that lives in their head rent-free every second of the day.
Or it's something that they return to when at the darkest sort of when during the creativity that might be a bit low, or something that just gives them goosebumps. And, so Heidi, if you've been able to have a bit of a think, are you able to tell us and our listeners what your absolute scene is?
I mean, I can, but it's a bit obscure.
Love it.
Love that. Come on.
So it's not a shared experience. Are you all right with that?
Yeah, of course.
I could go for
This
it.
is your absolute scene.
Right, so my absolute scene was I attended a festival called April Fest in Denmark. It was when I was part of Leave Home Scholarship at the Egg.
So what year was this, can I ask?
Oh, gosh, now don't start on
Vague, like 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
10 years ago.
Great.
Maybe with a plus on the end of that 10. I'm very sorry.
Right.
But I can picture it perfectly. And, you know, sometimes I don't know what I did yesterday. So
I'm the same.
That
I'm
tells you
exactly
something.
the
That
same.
tells you something, really. And I was watching this extraordinary, and it was extraordinary scene in a piece of work for children and young people. And performers were all kind of working in a space with a white floor. And at one point, one of the performers picked up a bag, or it might have even been a bucket. I mean, I'm saying I can remember it. I'm obviously now saying, oh, what was it? And in it contained this great kind of granite grey black sand, which they then worked in a circle around the edge of the stage. And the scene was carrying on, and it was just a kind of domestic task that it wasn't like, what is my character's motivation at this point? It was the story, the exchange was carrying on, but one of the performers just happened to pick up and move the sand into this circle on this white floor. And then slowly, beautifully, magically, like the opening of a flower almost, the young people that were in the audience slowly leant into the stage and started to draw. And the scene, I mean, even now, I feel the scene carried on, this beautiful. So it was working on so many levels, this piece of work. So this beautiful kind of story narrative was carrying on, kind of fairy tale driven. But on top of that, the audience were acknowledged for being the audience. And it felt like it was a piece of work that was truly for them. That was truly a gift, really. I talk about the gift a lot in the rehearsal room. You know, what is the gift of this moment? What is our gift to the audience? Because if it's not for them, I'm not really sure who it's
why
for.
are we
So
here?
can we just, get that? But that really influenced me, that moment where they just let those children be children, where they let them have that kind of creative space to
And was
respond in
anything
any way.
said to be, or was it just put down?
It was just there. I can't remember the transition moment, and I think that is frustrating for me, is that it happened, like I said, it was so beautiful and natural. I can't tell you how, because it must have been orchestrated in some way. It must have been, surely. But it was so subtle and beautiful and connected that you just go, gosh.
Feels like
That's
the
magic, isn't
ability to like doodle, like when you're at school,
Exactly.
to be able to like be present with something, but also doodle at the same time.
And they would look up and watch a bit and then go back and write the name, and because it's sand, rub it out, and then there would be drawing, and then they'd start linking drawings together, and then there was just a beautiful act of connection. So there you go.
So how have you taken that? Have you taken that and put that into your own? Like what is that? How is that?
I think, like I said, I think the way it infects or heightened for me was that who was this for? The audience.
I see.
Which feeds into the conversation that we had earlier about the pandemic and, art is not a luxury and who is this for, and connecting with communities. And, it's kind of nuances of themes that seem to run through not only my work, I suppose, but also how I try and work with people in the room, both rehearsal room and in a more kind of formal office environment, and board as well.
And of course, that's why now you have sand in every production.
All the time. It's a nightmare for the technicians. They love me.
So actually, one thing I wanted to ask you, because that's such a beautiful absolute scene, is you've obviously worked extensively in children's theatre and, across the whole thing. But obviously, sometimes there's a stigma in this industry. Here we go, about children's theatre. Have you felt that? Has that changed coming into a building that's for all humans, adults included? Do you know what I mean?
I know it's there.
Yeah.
But I won't indulge the feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the way I would say it. Because I don't actually believe in it.
No.
It's if you don't believe in it, then actually it can't really hurt you.
It's not welcome.
Because there's no such thing as some sort of purist child theatre. Because actually the challenge and the delight and the beauty and the precision actually and discipline that is needed in that work is partly because you are always trying to obviously connect with your audience, no matter what age or what size body they've got or where they are neurologically, it's kind of, inclusion in the widest sense of the word. But even when you're taking work into schools, there are teachers in the room.
Yes.
And it has to mean something to them. And those young people have to look at their teachers and say, they're enjoying this. If they look at their teachers and their teacher is marking and they really couldn't give a damn about what's going on stage, that the work is invalidated. So so it's much more sophisticated than people think, which is why I just go, well, I don't really believe in it, because actually, family work where you are working with audiences that are going to receive a story on lots of different levels, it's some of the most exciting work you can possibly make.
Also, to be able to capture the interest of a child.
Oh,
yeah.
And but also the other way is when you don't. And And I also love that. I also love, because I love the honesty.
Yeah. And you're like, great, we'll change that
At times
bit.
it's heartbreaking, don't get me wrong. There's times, and you're just thinking, oh, God, if just stay with it for just 30 seconds, the tone's just
It's going to be good, I promise.
It's going to be all right.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean about the precision and the discipline around, boredom and attention spans, and making sure that you're making work. I mean, making sure you know the difference between making work for a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old is really, really important.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant, because that then feeds into work that you then do with the community.
Yeah.
Do you, with your experience of teaching school-age children and beyond, have you found that their interest in the arts and in drama has come from it being introduced when they're at school, or has it more been outside of school in extracurricular activities such as sort of youth groups and youth theatres?
I mean, we've got a real problem in this country around creative capital. We've got a huge problem. And I think, what am I, 44 now, so thinking back and thinking about reflecting on my own routine without wanting to sound egotistical at all, was somewhat through school, and I just happened to be quite good at it. Or the other way of looking at it was that I was just terrible at other things, and it was the thing that I was okay at.
I think a lot of people have that experience.
Probably the most accurate way to talk about it, really. And because you're told you're okay at something, you
go, oh,
you grow and you flourish and you try things, and you build that confidence there. We work with young people of all various ages and at different entry points, and the entry point is really interesting for me as I look at our programme of work, which is how do we create a programme of work for children and young people and within our community, actually, so not just young people, where you don't have to have parental buy-in, which is so often the case with youth theatre members, so there's high level of parental buy-in to be able to pay for the fees and to bring them somewhere every week. Yeah. And I mean, they might want to bring them somewhere every week for an hour's break.
Take them.
Fine. It's absolutely fine. But how do we level that playing field? So the introduction of drop-in sessions for young people to just come in with no strings attached is really important. Working with our South Bristol community is really important for groups of young people that may not be engaged through the traditional routes of school. You've just got to keep working. You've got to keep working. You cannot presume this problem is solved. It really, really isn't, because the link between creative and cultural access and health and well-being for our society is huge. And I'm not here as a kind of political rant,
but it's the reality of where we're at.
We want human beings full of compassion and delight
and
caring and confidence
and joy
and emotional literacy and physical skills. Yeah. Like to be proud of their body, no matter what shape or, all of that. And the joy of theatre is that we always hope that it takes down the walls rather than builds them up. I mean, when you sit in an auditorium, you don't know who you sat next to.
No. But you're all having an experience together.
Collectively. Yeah. And so, you're desperate to try and find ways to build that more and more. I can say here, there's been a real, this was completely unexpected statistic we stumbled across about, I can't remember whether it was about a year ago, maybe a bit less, about 18 to 30s being our biggest growing audience here.
Oh, really?
And I think that's a generation that gets a lot of slack.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? With screens, digital age, or they don't want this and they don't want to work and they don't work as hard as people of my generation. They don't do this and they are. But actually we're seeing a huge shift of that age group kind of wanting to come in, have a live experience and connect.
Yeah.
Which is, amazing.
I think it's that's really interesting for me. My opinion on it is two fronts. One is because, exactly for the reason that Gen Z sort of fall within that bracket, because of the stick they get of that, and also because cost of living, because their their wages are somewhat lower when compared with, I suppose, myself as an old millennial and growing up, that their access to theatre, whilst maybe the physical theatres that we have, they may have more of, actually being able to spend the money that they don't necessarily have to get into the theatre may be somewhat different.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the joys of being in the location we are.
You can walk
Which
to...
is, we are on a lot of people's doorsteps. If you think about the kind of, the 15-minute walk from, here outwards, and the radius of that, and how many doorsteps that people can comfortably go have a bit of tea or whatever, or not, and then come out of their door and come to us and then go back home without the cost of a bus or a taxi or any of those additional costs, making sure that bar prices are really accessible and low, and working really hard on ticketing. It's not easy.
No.
It's really not easy because those ticketing costs relate to costs, fees of artists and the work that happens behind the scenes in terms of target audiences and the pressure on individuals to sell those, and marketing team to sell those tickets that do an amazing job. So it's a complicated kind of thing to try and understand. But I do think one of the strengths is our location.
Well, I think that brings us to our final question, because this has been incredible. So the final question for you, Heidi, is, what is the question you wish people would ask you?
Would you like another cup of tea?
Excellent.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, always. Do you have someone that brings you tea?
Actually, the team are brilliant at making tea.
Are they?
I am
like a good cup of tea as well?
I am terrible.
I know.
I feel like that is like having talked about me being kind and lovely. I'm not so good
can't
on
make you a
making
good
the tea. I'm not so good on the tea.
Amazing. What a way to finish.
That's great. Yeah, I love it.
Heidi, it's been a pleasure and a joy as always. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. And to all of the listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
You're brilliant. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Absolute gift. And thank you to to Heidi and also to the Tobacco Factory Theatre.
For hosting us.
And making us feel very welcome. It's been great.
You are welcome.
A wonderful venue. Until next week, where we'll return to you. But for now, that's us done.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Great show.
You've been listening to Absolute Scenes, written and hosted by Andy Barton and Gabrielle Shepherd.
Produced by Synchron Productions in association with the Bristol Vic Theatre.
Music by Brian Hargreaves.
Marketing and communications by Dylan Tozer, Amanda Adams and Gabrielle Shepherd.
Please like and subscribe in all the usual ways, depending on the platform that you're devouring this on.
We've also set up a page on Buy Me a Coffee, where if you feel so inclined, you can become a supporter of the pod and help us and our guests. But honestly, we're really glad to be in your ears, so absolutely no pressure.
And tune in next time, where it will be much the same, but different, like each of my visits to my barbers.